Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to today's session on the two-day impactful virtual dyslexia training. Um, for those of you who are unable to join yesterday, um, I'm not sure you have missed much and you'll be able to catch up with discussions that we're about to have this evening. My name is Beatrice Brew. I work as an international relations expert with particular focus on peace and security. And my co-host is Samantha, who would be introducing herself shortly. For today's session, we have two speakers leading discussions on very crucial topics when it comes to dyslexia. We have Miss Blessing Ngaipe, who would be talking about the power of a multi-sensory approach in teaching kids with dyslexia. And we have Dr. Lauren Mclenny Rosenstein, who would be leading discussions on the topic, how educators can implement tools and methods in the classroom. Now, I would be introducing the first speaker, and then Dr. Samantha would be introducing the second speaker subsequently. So Blessing Ngaipe is an international certified special needs teacher and dyslexic coach. She's the founder of Dyslexia Help Africa and is currently living in the city of Abuja, Nigeria. Blessing certification covers 13 disabilities mentioned in the IDEA, that is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, but her passion lies within kids with specific learning difficulties. Over the years, she has recorded amazing progress with working with these kids. She's also certified by the IBCCES, that is the International Board for Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards. This certification gives her the leverage to offer intervention services to children with special needs in any part of the world. So, like I said to you, you're all in very good hands in terms of understanding how to work with, live with, and also enhance the lives of children and even adults with dyslexia. Currently, she's running a dyslexia course with the University College London and is a scholarship beneficiary of the Learning Disability Association of America. We can do a round of applause for Blessing, or we can all give her a snap whilst to introduce her. So over to you, Samantha.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Welcome again, everyone. I am happy to see those who have joined us from yesterday and those who are new to the session. We're happy to have you on board. Just to give you an overview, so my name is Samantha K Johnston, and I am originally from Jamaica, but currently now live in Australia. And I am the founder of Reading for Humanity. And Reading for Humanity is really an organization that seeks to increase teacher training and teacher knowledge in the science of reading so that we can aim to ensure that all students are reading by grade 3, because the research tells us that if students aren't reading by grade 3, they are more likely to have poorer academic and life outcomes. So that really is the main goal of Reading for Humanity. And I'm happy this evening to pass you along to our speakers. You're in very good hands, as Beatrice mentioned. What I also want to highlight again, just a few reminders in terms of our house rules. Just to ensure that everyone enjoys the session, we're going to ask you to let your camera stay on as much as you can. Try to be on mute as much as you can so that we can ensure that we don't have any sort of interruptions in the session. We're going to ask you to also submit your questions in the chat box while the training is going on, because this will be very useful for our question and answer section. We encourage you to also raise your hands during the Q&A sections. But when we're going to give you the opportunity to also ask your comments and your questions and comments, please be brief, because we just want to make sure that we're respecting of the time, because we are aware that persons have other sessions to go on to. And bear in mind that we still want this session to be organic, still within time, but organic. So we're going to ensure that we still keep within the time, but also maintain that flow in the conversation. So we just want to thank you for that. And what I'm going to do now is just to call on Rosalind, the founder of Africa Dyslexia Association, and also Joy Thomas, the founder of Dyslexia Ghana, just to say a few words before we get started.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Thank you for those of you who were here with us yesterday. We hope that you learned a thing or two. And today we are very excited that you're joining us today. And for those of you who weren't here yesterday, thank you for joining this time. This session as well will be very beneficial to you. And at the end, we are going to share both videos from yesterday and today to you and all other resources. So even if you missed it yesterday, you will not really miss out much. So don't worry. Just stay tuned, let your pen and your notepad be ready and have fun. Enjoy the training and we hope to link up after this. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Joy Thomas. Can you hear me?
Yes, Joy.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Joy Thomas, and I hope the ones that came yesterday really enjoyed themselves, because I did tremendously, and I'm looking forward to today as well. And you never can say that you know too much, because I learned some things that I wasn't even aware of. So please keep an open mind and enjoy the ride. And I look forward to seeing you again at the end. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rosalind and Joy. And Beatrice has already beautifully introduced Miss Blessing. So we're going to pass it on to her now for her to present to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you, Samantha. Can everybody hear me? Am I loud and clear?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So like my kids will say, let's get this party started. Let's get this dyslexia party started. Today, let me quickly share my screen. Thank you so much, my dear friend, Rosalind, for this opportunity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dyslexia Ghana. Thank you. Okay, so today I'll be talking to us about the power of a multisensory approach in teaching kids with dyslexia. And this topic is very, very dear to me because whenever I go out to train people on dyslexia and to tell them more about dyslexia, I always want it to be in a way that they can quickly go back to their classrooms and start implementing whatever they've learned in the lives of the struggling learners they have come in contact with. Because the truth is, in every classroom, there is a child with dyslexia. I offer classroom for kids in schools, kids who have dyslexia. And for each time I've gone there to offer an intervention for a child, while sitting there and helping my students in class, I see another child who is also struggling. So we can't deny the fact that in every classroom, there is a child who is struggling. If you're a teacher here and you really can't figure out if a child is struggling in your class or not, then you haven't looked deep enough. Because sometimes you might even think they are not struggling, but if you look deeper, you know that there is a problem somewhere. And one thing I love about the multisensory approach is that it is an approach anyone can use. You don't need to go for an intensive training. You don't need to go for years or months of taking courses on multisensory approach before you can take a child. All you need to do is use your tools as a teacher, and it will be very beneficial for your child with dyslexia. So, as we go forward in this training, I would like like to tell you a tale of three kids. One, Nyadi, who is about 3 to 4 years old, and then Kaku, who is, let's say, 8 years old, and Ivy, who is about 6. Now, the stories of these kids, these are real stories of some of my students, of course. The only difference is that these are not their real names, and of course, these are not their real faces, but the stories are real. Now, let's talk about Nyadi, who is between 3 and 4, going to 4, which seem to be struggling in class. And when we met Nyadi's mom, one of our major concerns was that her child was never or has never been able to learn the alphabet past the letter C. It has been on ABC, which is even a struggle. And you know, of course, when a child is struggling with ABC, you obviously can't even move to other letters because that is the foundation. Another complaint that the mom also had was that Nyadi could not write her numbers. For each time she was given a pen or a paper to write her numbers, she'll end up chewing her pen or just staring at her paper. And she really, really was bothered, especially because in this part of the world where I am, you see many kids who are 3 or 4 years already reciting their letters, telling you their sounds, writing 1 to 20 and all of that. So when you find your child in a class or with kids in that age group and your child seems to be lagging behind, you truly as a mother would be concerned. Now, how about Kaku? Her mom's complaint was that each time it was time to go to school, he would start crying, like literally. And he would clearly say that he hates school. I hate school. I don't want to go to school today. Secondly, when he's finally in school, he would disrupt the class when it's learning time. And of course, if you have a child who has all of these things we just mentioned, you would definitely be concerned. And then from mom and from school, the complaint regarding Ivy was that she was forgetful. She'll learn a thing now and forget it the next minute. And it was also strange to them because Ivy knew her phonemes. I mean, she can tell you that A makes a sound A from A down to Z. But then when it came to putting those words together, putting those sounds together to call a word, it became a problem. I mean, if you're here, you're a teacher and an educator. I mean, when a child knows their phonemes, I'm sure we believe that, oh, putting n, and just saying shouldn't be that hard, or putting s, and t together just to say cat shouldn't be that hard. But that wasn't the case here. It seemed putting those 2 sounds together or 3 sounds together to make a word was even more harder for Ivy than learning the sounds from A to Z altogether. Now, if you've been teaching for a while, I'm sure that some of these traits I've mentioned either in the life of Ivy or in the life of Kaku or in the life of Nyadi is something you have experienced before. Am I right? Well, if it's something you have, so I know that I'm not alone here as a teacher, also that I also know that we have this set of kids don't only exist in Nigeria, then let me know down, just comment down and say, yes, I have seen some kids with these traits. But guess what? For some of these kids that you have seen struggling, like the examples I just gave of my real students, Nyadi, Kaku, and Ivy, a multisensory approach can solve 60% of these complaints. And this is something that I'm talking about from experience, because 2 major ways or 2 major methods that work for children with dyslexia, a multisensory approach and a structured literacy program. To tell you how important the multisensory approach is that a structured literacy program cannot stand without a multisensory approach. However, a multisensory approach can stand on its own, but a structured literacy program can't stand on its own. What this means is that even if you're trained on how to teach a child in a structured way, a child with dyslexia literacy in a structured way, if you do not include the multisensory approach in teaching them in a structured way, you still would not get some positive results. So now you see why it is important that you ensure that a multisensory approach as a teacher is part of your core teaching methods in the classroom. Now you might be asking that what is a multisensory teaching approach? It is a teaching method that involves engaging more than one sense at a time. It means that if I'm teaching a child with dyslexia, of course, at the end of this training or this talk that I'm having now, you realize that a multi-sensory teaching approach is not just for a child with dyslexia, but it actually benefits every child. And I believe that in every classroom, kids should be taught and in ways that engages more than one sense. That means it engages the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, or tactile. It simply means that whatever I'm teaching, can my students see it? Can my student hear it? Can my student manipulate it? Can my student move it around? Because I know in most schools, aside, of course, in Montessori schools, you have children sitting in one place for a very long time, especially public schools, learning for 40 minutes. Here in Nigeria, a class is one lesson or one class takes about 30 to 40 minutes. So you have a child sit for 30 minutes from beginning to the end, just listening to the teacher or just copying notes and all of that. Now, as a teacher, if you're interested in using a multisensory approach, which you should, the questions you ask yourself when planning your lesson plan is that this lesson plan, can my students see it? Whatever I'm teaching, okay, let's assume it is the letter A. Since most kids with dyslexia, their fundamental issue has to do with phonics. You're teaching the letter A, you're teaching the sound A. The question you should ask yourself as you prepare for that class is, can my students see this A? Can they hear it? Can they manipulate it? Can they feel it? Feel it. Now, if you're able to answer these 4 questions, believe me, you're going to have a successful class. Now, let's go back to the story I was talking to you about the kids. So for Nyadi, what did we do? Or rather, what are we doing? Because these are kids we're still working with. The first thing we had to do was to teach the letters in different ways. Now, if you're teaching a child a particular thing, for the purpose of this training, I'm going to be talking more about teaching them letters, teaching them sounds, because most of the complaints I always get from teachers or from parents is that, oh, they don't know their ABCs, oh, they don't know their sounds. So for the purpose of this training, I'm going to be focusing more on your lesson plan on letters, your lesson plan on numbers, your lesson plans on the foundational learning programs. So the first thing we had to do was to teach the letters in different ways. Now, when you teach your child in the classroom, of course, you can apply this to any other subject or any other topic. Do you teach it in just one way, or do you try different ways? A multisensory approach expects you to be creative. One thing we do at the Center Dyslexia Help Africa is to ensure that for each time you're coming into the class to teach the same thing, you don't teach it the same way. So my goal for this week could be to teach letter A to letter C. Now, what that means for me as a teacher is that when I come to the class on Monday, I'm coming to teach it in a different way. If I come to the class on Tuesday, I have a different method I want to use. If I come to class on Wednesday, for every day I come, I should have a different method. Of course, there are exceptions. Like there was a time I came into the class that particular day with puzzles. We used puzzles to learn our letters, our numbers. And the next day I had a different method I wanted to use. And my student was like, where is the puzzle? Like, the puzzle is here, but I want us to try something else. And he was like, no, I want the puzzle. I really would still love the puzzle. I love the puzzle. I was like, okay, you love the puzzle. All right, let's go back to it. So I found a way to still teach the same thing using the puzzle, because one, that's what he was interested in. And because he's interested in it, it was easier for him to learn it. And that's another thing too, especially for us in the African community and in the community where I am, where the teacher stands as an authoritative figure and says, no, today, this is what we are learning. Nobody's using the puzzle. We're using this for learning. So forget about the puzzle. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Remember, if a child is not learning the way you're teaching them, you should teach them the way they love to learn. And that's one thing you need to understand in using the multisensory approach. So we had to teach her the letters in different ways, different, not just one way. You need to always try different methods. I love to call it resolve, trying again and again and again, and not just staying on one thing and saying, oh, we've tried letters, this child doesn't know letters. How many times have you tried it? I had a book that said 101 ways to teach letters. Wow. So most times when teachers or educators come to me and say, I'm teaching this child and they just can't learn, the question I ask is, how are you teaching this child? And what are the different methods you have used in teaching this child this same thing? Are you just doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a change? I believe there is a popular quote that says, you're doing the same thing again and again and again, and expecting a change is like insanity, right? I believe there is a quote like that. So you need to have different ways. And that's why, as an educator, as someone who is interested in teaching these kids with dyslexia, you cannot afford not to be creative. And thank God for Google, where you have 1,001 millions of ideas that you can pick and tilt them or tweak them in a way that it will work for your kids. So we did that and we realized that she was making more progress. Also, we excused the pen for a while and wrote on other surfaces. I mean, who said you must write with a pen and a paper? Now, as a teacher of children with dyslexia, you have to always tell yourself the truth by answering this question: what is the goal here? Is the goal for the student to write letter A, B, C, or numbers? Or the goal is for the student to write on a piece of paper with a pencil? So if your goal, which of course most schools or most curriculum that I know, is for the child to be able to write, it doesn't always have to be the pen and the paper, especially when you have a child who is just chewing on the pen or who doesn't even want to see the paper. Learning doesn't have to stop there, not at all. We tried other surfaces like using a salt tray. Oh boy, she was so excited. Oh, Miss Blessing, is this salt? What are we going to do with it? And of course, before even writing, we played with the salt, dabbed it all over the tray. She helped me in dabbing it all over the tray. And then I wrote my letter first, and she was so excited and happy to write. Ta-da! Goal achieved. So while you're there being strict and saying that, you know what, you must write with this pencil and you must use this paper, I'm already achieving so much with my child who is writing on sand, who is tracing on the floor, who is writing on the salt. And the amazing thing with this is that in using the salt tray and using those other surfaces, we're also able to let her hold the pen and start writing. How do we do that? Because she loved using the sand tray, we took it as an advantage and we said, okay, you know what? If you write this letter using your pen twice, then you're going to have the salt tray for about 10 minutes. So do we have a deal? I'm sure you know the answer. We sure had a deal. So by each time we came to the class using the salt tray, we also took the opportunity to make her write something the teachers have been struggling with for a very, very long time. So, do you have a student like Nyad in your class, or have you met someone, a child like this before? If you have, let me know in the comment so that I know that I'm not the only one who has come in contact with a child like this. So have you met a child who doesn't like writing at all, who doesn't want to hold the pen, who seem just not able to learn their letters? Someone like Nyadi. If you do, then let's sit down in the comments. Now, you can see some of the methods we used here. This is a letter B. We created it and then took pictures of words that begin with the letter B. You have bottle there, you have a Barbie there, and all of that for her to identify the letters. And because she was interested in pasting all of that, for each time she pasted bottle starts with the letter B, and B makes a sound B. So you can imagine we have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, over 11 pictures there. So for each time she was pasting those pictures, she was telling us the letter and she was telling us the sound. And that became an interesting way of learning for her. And then another thing you can also do is the mystery bag. Okay, so today we are looking for letter B. Now she's always going to remember that because it is connected to a mystery bag. It is connected to something that is fun. So you're leaving memories in her head that will not be forgotten soon. All right, so now let's talk about Kaku. What did we do? We taught him using the things he likes. Do you remember Kaku, the story about Kaku? He didn't like going to school at all and said he hated school. And then when he went to school, he would disrupt the class and ensure that the other kids weren't learning at all. He loved cars. So we ensured that we used cars and we used games to teach him. Apps, which I'm going to show the picture very soon. We also figured out why he was disrupting the class. When we're able to get the answer, that number one answer, because that made him calm. I remember the last time we had a class with him and we were done. And he was like, Miss Blessing, are you done? I said, yes, we are done for today. And he said, but I still want to learn. I'm like, the school is over. I have to go and you have to go too. Now remember, this is a child who it was once said that didn't love school and didn't love to learn. What changed? Learning became interesting. And that's one major thing that as a teacher, as an educator, you need to look into. It has to be about your child and not about you. Most times we get into the classroom thinking about us. Okay, let me teach this subject this way. Let me teach B this way. No, it should be about the child. Now look at your child. Of course, as a teacher, you should know your student. What is my student interested in? How should I teach this letter? Okay, my students are interested in cars. I have a group of kids who are interested in toys and all of that. How do I bring this toy into learning this? These are the questions that you should ask yourself when stepping into a class where you have struggling learners. And like I said, at the end of this presentation, you realize that the multisensory approach is not just for struggling learners, but it is a method that every teacher should be using in the classroom. So we figured out that he was disrupting the class because for each time he disrupted the class, the teacher would ask him to go and face the wall. And for him, that was party time, that was fun time. And we also realized that he was disrupting not just the class, he was disrupting the literacy class because other classes he would sit calm. But when it was time for literacy, he would disrupt the literacy class. So he was using that behavioral issue to avoid classes. The teacher, on the other hand, thought, okay, I'm giving this boy a consequence by asking him to face the wall. But the teacher was doing exactly what Kaku wanted. I'm gonna disrupt the class now because I'm not interested in learning this letter of yours. in this boring manner, because I want to believe it was boring. Because if he was learning when I brought in cars and when we brought in games, and he's not learning when he's in your classroom, it explains one thing: it is not exciting for him. I need to understand that children with dyslexia are very, very creative. I mean, you don't need to go far. People with dyslexia are creative. Rosalind is right here with the amazing things she does. If she doesn't tell you that she's dyslexic, you will never, ever know. So their mind is not wired for boring things. These are kids, these are minds that want to explore. And no wonder there are people who have the most innovation. I mean, call the popular names in the entertainment world, in the architectural world, in the writing world, authors, just call them. There are people with dyslexia, and that's because of the way the brain is wired. You can see here an app. Now, when we talk about games, it could be an app from your phone or from a tab or from the computer, whatever app it is that is focused on learning letters or learning whatever your child is struggling with. Thank God for technology. By the time you go to your Play Store or your any store where you get your apps from, you will be able to get an app that suits the needs of your child. Apps on silent E, apps on letters, apps on numbers, whatever app you're looking for, they are right there. And then you can see these are cars. Can you see how the cars are numbered? 5, 4, 3. I mean, this was exciting for him. He loves cars. So let's drive car 3 to the shop or to a mall. Now bring car 5 back to the shopping mall or bring car 5 back to the parking lot. Exciting way of learning. And no wonder he didn't want the class to end, because he was having fun and we're achieving the goal of him learning. Now let's talk about Ivy. Remember Ivy's story? What did we do? We had to present the same thing different ways consistently. Remember Ivy's story? For how one of the major issues was her forgetting. Now, we'll talk about why children forget. We'll have to dive into another topic entirely, which is working memory. But if you're an educator here, you can write that down, working memory, and then you can research on it. It will really help you to understand why kids forget. So we have to present the same thing in different ways consistently. Now, the key word there is consistently, every day. And if we're not going to meet every day like in weekends, we ensure that there was a homework that focused on whatever we're working on. Now, that is another thing again for educators. When you're giving homework, or like we love to call it home fun, ensure that it is a work that reinforces what you have taught. Because most times where I am from, in my community here, when teachers give homework, they give something that they haven't taught or something that is higher. When you're giving homework or home fun, it should be to reinforce. Now I'm talking specifically for children with learning issues. It should be to reinforce what you have taught. So if I'm giving out homework out to my students, I'm going to give out what the child has mastered. I'm going to say, go back and do this again. I'm not going to give out what he's struggling with. Why? Because the more time a child writes the wrong thing, the more you're reinforcing that wrong thing. So for instance, if a child keeps writing the letter C the wrong way over and over again, probably you gave that student a piece of paper, write letter C, and then you went away to do whatever you're doing, and the child is writing letter C the other way over and over again. What you have just done is that you have reinforced the wrong way of writing the letter A, letter C, and it really would have been better if you didn't teach that child at all, because you've told the brain that, okay, letter C this way, letter C the wrong way, letter C the wrong way, and the child continually wrote it the wrong way, and then you came and you started saying, oh no, this is wrong, erase it, erase it. you've already badged that in his head, and you've actually done worse. It would have been better to even leave him that way. So consistently on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and if we're not going to be together on Saturday and Sunday, we gave work that covered Saturday, we gave work that covered Sunday, and then we continued again on Monday, hammering it until it moves from that part of the brain to the other part where it stays there permanently. If you read about working memory, you understand better what I'm trying to explain here. And then a structured reading program. Remember, the second part was that she couldn't read. Now, when we talk about a structured reading program, we're basically talking about a reading program that is structured. It's just like a ladder. We don't climb the next step until we are done with the step that we are on. And if teachers would understand this, it will be very helpful. Now, we have come to work with some kids that when we checked, they really couldn't tell us the sounds of the alphabet. And then they were reading 3-letter words. And you just can't connect it. I mean, if you can't tell me that letter V makes the sound V, how on earth do you know that V, A, N is van? What does that tell you? 3-letter words that they were learning, they were simply cramming them. Because when you tell the child, okay, so this is van, can you tell me this first sound? The child doesn't know it. Can you tell me the second sound? The child doesn't know it. Can you tell me the last sound? The child doesn't know it. So if you can't tell me the sound, then it means you're not reading. What you have done is you have just crammed. And this is what most educators do. Now I understand, because some don't really know the right thing to do, that I'm happy for events like this, that the Dyslexia organization has set up to help us understand. Now, it is important when we talk about structured reading program or structured literacy program, is that if I haven't mastered all the sounds of the alphabet, I shouldn't move to something new yet, because whatever I'm going to do next is going to be built on the foundation of knowing my sounds from A to Z. Now, when I'm done with that, okay, let's go to our vowels. If you haven't mastered them yet, I'm not going to bring any other new thing in until you have mastered them. And then we can move to the third stairs, or the third part of the ladder, or the third leg of the ladder, where I'm now bringing my 2-letter words. And I'm going to ensure that you're not cramming. There's a book we have here in Nigeria. I don't know if it is there in Ghana or any other part of the world. They call it the Queen Primer, which some people abuse, because you see most kids with that book, and the only thing they're doing with that book is that they're cramming. Take the book away and tell them to, okay, can you write that down? They don't know. But say, okay, write an. They have crammed it, so they write it down. Okay, how about can you put that down? They can't put it down. That is total cramming. So you want to ensure that your students can decode and encode. What that means that they can, if I say put down an for me, they understand that it's an. And if I say, okay, we have the word an on the paper, can you tell me the sounds that are in an? A student who is going through a structural literacy program should be able to tell me that gives me an. So you keep building step by step, and you don't leave a step until a child has mastered it. So I've mentioned 3 cases of kids with who are struggling with learning here, and I'm sure that a lot of us listening to me right now can relate in one way or the other, especially if you're an educator, with some of the things I've mentioned here. Now, pictures to show what we mean. Now, our structural literacy program, you can see, I
Hello, Blessing. I think you've gone on mute. Hello, Blessing.
Now here is a
Hello, Blessing, you've gone on mute again.
okay. I think I was muted generally from the host. But can everyone hear me now? Hope I haven't been muted for a very long time.
You've been muted for at least the last 3 minutes.
Okay. So just in case I go mute again, I think it's from. Okay, I get it. I understand why. Okay, so let me go back and round up my slides. Thank you. Okay, where was I? Here on my WhatsApp. Where my slide is. Okay. Okay, this is one of my favorite books right now because I'm sure some people are wondering, okay, so this structured literacy program, how do I know about it? How do I go about it? Of course, my topic for today is focused on the multisensory approach. So that if you're interested in learning more about structured literacy program, this is a very good material. I will ask you to get it. It will help. Now, beyond learning, a multisensory approach puts an end to behavior problems in the class. Did you notice that? Did you notice that when the multisensory approach was used for him, that's Kaku, I mean, the problem of not wanting to learn ended? Now, you might be asking that is a multisensory approach effective in a regular classroom or just in a one-on-one teaching method? I'm going to respond to that during the question and answer session. Okay, so thank you for your rapt attention and interaction. Thank you so much. I hope you were able to learn a thing or two, and I hope I have not gone beyond my time.
Thank you so much, Blessing. No, and you haven't gone beyond your time. You actually,
Okay.
you actually saved us quite some time. It was a really, really an insightful presentation. Thank you so much for such an amazing job. It was so easy to follow. Listening to Joy yesterday, one of the things that struck me was the fact that for the most part, in our parts of the world, the most that's done for kids with special needs or with dyslexic children is that they once they are not coping well in school, they just have to change schools. And we already know that even with what we may term as regular kids, that's a struggle in itself. And so that's a really major challenge when it comes to it's a real matter of concern when it comes to understanding the needs of these special needs kids. And in our parts as well, and hearing you speak as well, one of the common things you hear is that there are two kinds of kids you find in school, per how our system works. So you're either a happy, brilliant child, or you are lazy, inattentive, or even a dull child, just because you're just not acting like every child. And it's really a matter of concern, and it's an amazing job all of you are doing. Joy, you, Rosalind, and everyone. I'm here on this training as well, because my understanding is that we all are together looking forward to doing something impactful when it comes to improving the lives and well-being and education of people with dyslexia. So and of course I appreciate the fact that when it comes to special education, we would all agree that it has a lot of relevance to the teacher. And it's important for teachers to be exposed to the rudiments of special needs education. So I thought, as moderator, I'd throw in the first question and say,
okay,
how are we looking at approaches to influencing policy on special needs education? Are we looking at where are we raising awareness in the policy space? How are we looking at incorporation of special needs in teacher training curriculum, for instance, so that for every teacher training school, one of the things that you would be required to do is to take a compulsory module, for instance, on special needs education? Because like you said, there's a lot of things that we have to do as an educator, as a teacher, in terms of paying attention to the child. But we would also admit that we all do not have that gift where we can pay attention to the child like that and realize that this is just maybe a playful child who would bloom later, or is a dyslexic child, or is a child that has, say, ADHD. So that awareness, what are we doing in the policy space to regulate that? That's first to you, blessing. So I'll also be looking in the chat box for questions from the other participants as well. We have, my understanding is we have up to about 10 minutes because you finished your session on time for Q&A. So like Samantha said, if we keep our questions short and simple for those that would be speaking as well, it would be useful. Thank you so much, Blessing.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to answer this and then I'll answer the other question. I wanted to answer, but I thought my time was over, so I skipped it. Okay, here in Nigeria, interestingly, we have policies for all of this. I was shocked to know that there was actually a policy that really benefited children with learning issues, because all of this training you just mentioned was there in that piece of paper. The teacher training was there, a child receiving attention was there, a child receiving assessment was there. All of these things were there. And also recently in Nigeria, a bill was also passed. So if you are to look into all of the policies and all of the documents, you realize that for here in Nigeria, all of those things are there. But the problem now is it being enforced. And that's where it comes with working with the ministries of education and working with the government, because we need to get someone there who understands. Now, it is so sad because sometimes you're talking to people who are in the top space of education in the government and they have never heard anything about dyslexia, which of course is no longer surprising because in Nigeria, the percentage is about 2. So when you talk about teachers, in 100%, only 2% of teachers have heard about dyslexia. That was a research for last year. Now remember, they have heard about dyslexia. They don't know how to teach children with dyslexia yet. So you can imagine the ignorance already that is flowing all over the place, which with events like this, we're trying to make more people understand. So to answer your question, we'd have to first of all penetrate into the government by bringing these people out, calling their attention and saying, you know what, Minister of Education, there is something called dyslexia, and you even know that there is a bill that you have in your policy regarding this. So can we enforce this? Which is one of the major issues, enforcing this in private schools. Let's not even talk about public schools yet. Enforcing this in private schools, because sometimes you're in a school and you're asking them for accommodation. Now, what does that mean? Remember that a child can read doesn't mean a child is dumb. So I might not be able to read, but it doesn't mean I can't understand, I can't comprehend. So while these kids are going through intervention, what we try to do is that, okay, you don't have to pause to be in a particular class just because you can read. Why don't we read these questions for you and then you can answer? Or why can't your notes be recorded? In a place like Nigeria or Africa, most schools will tell you that is cheating. That no, you're not reading for this child. No, you can't read for this child, is cheating. So we need to create more awareness. Before the COVID session, one of our other dyslexia organization that will partner with Rosenstein, One World Africa, we actually had a project of going from state to state and meeting these people in the top field in education and telling them that, you know what, this is what dyslexia is. You already have these policies in place. We want to join hands with you and to help you enforce them. So now that the restrictions have been taken off for to an extent now, I think we can get back to hand and we can continue that. But definitely we can do it without the people at the top. So we need their help to make sure that this is enforced. Thank you.
All right.
So can I go ahead and answer my question? My own question.
So I'll quickly throw in a question from Samson, and then you can add it to answering your own question.
All right.
We all understand that there's a need for us to have a system that accommodates special needs children and, you know, incorporates them into mainstream education, where they also interact with what we would call the regular kids. And so Samson's question is, you have more than 30 pupils in your class. Surely you have pupils with dyslexia in your class. How can you teach to the level of understanding of all the pupils within the same week? Should you have a different assessment approach to dyslexic pupils? I think that time is the key factor between a dyslexic pupil and will be able to absorb what his or her challenges are when the assessment with him or her on that, and how can this issue be resolved? Okay, so let's talk about the first one, which is accommodating a child with dyslexia in a class where there are 30 pupils. Now, on the just concluded Dyslexia Online conference that we had, someone asked a question and said, how do you make out time for a child with dyslexia who is in your class? And I love what the person on the panel said. He said, first of all, that question is wrong, because that child is in your class. You shouldn't be making out time for that child. That child is in your class and the needs of that child should be met. And that's where multisensory approach comes in. Now, if you're creating your lesson, ask yourself those questions. How can my students see this lesson? How can they feel it? How can they hear it? How can they manipulate it? Of course, it makes your class interesting at all times. And believe me, it gets the attention of a child with dyslexia. But what you find out that happens in most classes is that it's just a give and take thing. You just come and we teach in a regular way. I mean, I was telling some teachers that meeting the needs of every child in your class has become a 21st century skill that every teacher must get. You can't step into the classroom with one particular method of teaching just to meet the needs of some specific kids. You have different learners in your classroom. So if you're preparing your lesson for those 30 students, you have to think of ways. How can I teach this lesson to a smart child? How can I teach in quotes? How can I teach this lesson to a child who is struggling with learning? How can I teach this lesson to a child who forgets? And you're going to find a connecting dot on how to bring your lesson out in a way that meets the needs of all the children. Now, I know that this is not a walk in the park, but like I always tell teachers, Google is your friend. There are 1,001 ways to teach the same thing. So you go out there, you do the research. Now, that's another thing. As a teacher, you are a researcher. Why? Because your kids, your students, or I love to call them my kids, your kids are like
you're looking for ways to help them daily. You're researching on how to help them daily. So you can't go to bed without thinking of how did my lesson go today, which is what I believe usually comes with a lesson plan to reflection. And sometimes we take that reflection for granted, but it is one of the most important parts of a lesson. You're thinking about your lesson. What went wrong? What didn't I do correctly? So at that point in time, you're not thinking about your students as in what they didn't do correctly. You're focusing on you now. What didn't I do correctly? How should I have taught this lesson better? So as a teacher, to answer that first question, have a lesson plan that covers the needs of everyone. Now, I can see someone mentioning Pinterest. Amazing. I mean, that's a free app that you can just download and see different ways to teach the same thing. I mean, if you see that in your own word, you just be teaching one thing the same way. And then secondly, what was the second part of the question again?
Assessments.
Okay, now when you are assessing, yes. Now you remember I was talking about accommodations. When you are assessing, you have accommodation and modifications. When you're assessing a child, you need to first of all understand the level where your child is. Now there are some times that in that same class, you have used a multisensory approach, but probably your students in that class goal for that particular class is to learn the times table from 1 to 12. And when using the multisensory approach, your student who is struggling with learning is still on 6. Now, what that means is that in assessing them during exams, you're going to assess that child between the times table between 1 to 6. That's what it means, because they haven't mastered 12. So you don't rush the curriculum and say, oh, because everybody's doing one. That is not fair at all. And if you're to look into our policies, in our policies, that does not support it. It's just that most people don't even know what is inside. Even the government doesn't know what is inside. I don't know how it was gotten. I don't know if it was copied and just pasted. Schools don't understand what is inside. And then secondly, accommodation. What I just mentioned is what we call modification. You're modifying the curriculum to help a child who's struggling with learning. And then accommodating them, like I mentioned. Someone is there to explain the question to them. Now, sometimes kids who are struggling with learning can also struggle with comprehension. Currently, kids here in Nigeria are writing exams, and I have a couple of kids I support. And I've been coming to their classrooms to help them with their exams. And the first time I came in 30 minutes into their exams, and when I looked into her script, I mean, 90% of the answers were wrong. I said, okay, so question 1, I read it out for her, and she got the answer correctly. What does that mean? It means she read it, but she didn't understand what it meant. But when I was able to read it out to her and explain that this is what they are asking, what is the answer, she was able to answer it correctly. So in assessing your kids, you have to ensure that you're accommodating them and you're also modifying for them. Yes, I believe that answers that question.
Thank you so much, Blessing, for such an insightful presentation and also for the feedback on the questions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time on Blessing's session, but what we're going to do is that we're going to provide Blessing's contact details in the chat box. So keep your eye on the chat box. So you have any additional questions and comments, you can send them through to Blessing. Thank you so much. And then I'll hand over to Samantha to introduce our next speaker.
Okay, I wanted to round off with this. Sorry, Samantha, I wanted to round off with this. Is one of the exercises I love to use when I'm rounding up. Now, I'm sure when we talk about dyslexia awareness and supporting children with dyslexia, probably you're listening right now, you're watching this, maybe you're just whiling away time in quote, you're not a teacher, you're not an educator. They just said, okay, let me be here. I want to ask you a question. I'm sure if you were following my slides, you saw some typographical errors, right? Now, what was your mindset towards it? What did you say in your heart? Because I have an adult friend who is dyslexic, and sadly, right now in 2020, she has a blog, and when she writes and make errors, she has adults coming in to throw in nasty words at her errors. Now, I'm just trying to say that when it comes to dyslexia awareness, it's not just about teachers or people in the education, but it's everybody in the community, everybody in the society, understanding that there is a reading problem. and that does not determine the future of any individual. Thank you so much for the extra few minutes.
So let's all give Blessing a wave as Samantha comes in to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Beatrice, and thank you so much for the insightful presentation, Blessing. We learned a lot, and that was evident by the number of questions that we have coming in. So I have the honor of introducing our next speaker for this evening or this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. And she's Dr. Lauren Mclenny Rosenstein. So she has been certified at the associate level in the Orton Gillingham Academy for 6 years and has been a certified special educator for 10 years. She was an elementary classroom teacher for 4 years in 2 specialized private schools, serving students with language-based disabilities such as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and processing deficits. Dr. Lauren was also a public middle school special educator for 4 years, co-teaching 7th and 8th grade math and English language arts, along with resource math and math seminars. She worked for a nonprofit organization that advocated for inclusion in public schools for students with disabilities while tutoring students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, and other language-based disabilities. Currently, Dr. Lauren is a middle school learning specialist and instructional coach at a private Quaker school in Baltimore, Maryland. Her passions include educating, advocating, and bringing awareness to dyslexia at the domestic and international level. So welcome, Dr. Lauren, and I'll pass it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see such a great turnout here. Can everyone hear me? Is my sound
Yes.
good? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Put up my presentation. Okay, can everyone see? Okay. All right. So, Blessing, thank you so much for talking about multisensory teaching. This presentation will focus more on what you can do with it in the classroom. So, let's see here. I don't know if you guys can see when people are being admitted. I hope you can't see that because I don't want it to distract the slides. Okay, so that was a really great introduction to about 10 years of what I've been doing work-wise. I just want to touch a little bit on that. So I always like to start off my presentations by letting my audience know that I am actually not, I'm actually not an adult with dyslexia. I have 2 children. They do not have dyslexia. And as far as I know, there's no one in my family that has dyslexia. However, when I graduated from graduate school with my master's degree, my first master's was in elementary ed, and then my second was special ed. And so my first job that I landed out of graduate school was actually at a private dyslexic school in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. So for those of you who aren't aware, I live in the United States, and I was born and raised in Maryland, which is not too far from Washington, D.C. And so I went to school in upstate New York at Syracuse, and then I ventured down to Atlanta, and that was my first job. So there was my first opportunity to really get my feet wet knowing what dyslexia was. I worked very closely and was trained with an Orton Gillingham fellow, and I was able to really practice what the multisensory approach looked like in the classroom level, hands-on, being observed. So, as my bio had said, I then left and went to another specialized private school in Washington, D.C. called the Lab School. And that was a really great experience for me because I actually was hired because of my Orton Gillingham training. And I did code groups, which I probably taught about 30 kids in small groups. They kind of rotated like middle schoolers. And we did intensive remediation. And my classroom experience there was amazing. I worked very closely with a speech language pathologist, with an occupational therapist, and with a social worker. And that those first 4 years were very formative for me and my passion for educating and advocating for dyslexia. And then I realized shortly after, when I went to public school, nobody really talked about dyslexia. Nobody really knew what it was. Teachers were kind of like, yeah, this kid can't read, making statements that were really damaging. And I think a lot of it, the more that I was unpacking why this wasn't discussed, was really lack of knowledge, lack of understanding what dyslexia is and how you can teach to the child. And so after that, I've gone on to other different things as it was introduced. I worked in a nonprofit, and now currently my position is new. I started this in August. I'm very excited. So I'm not actually teaching. I'm coaching staff to understand what various disabilities look like. And then I'm also supporting students. And my job is very multifaceted, and it's never a dull day, but I'm always excited to see what adventures are around the corner. So that's a little bit about myself. So I know Blessing did talk about multisensory, but I do want to share I'm going to bring my screen down here. I want to share my experiences with the multisensory approach. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Orton-Gillingham methodology, it is the most properly understood and practiced approach. It is not a method or a program or a system. It is an approach, and that's important for people to know and understand that. So this is typically known as the gold standard in training teachers to teach children how to read, more specifically students with language-based disabilities such as dyslexia. So in the hands of a well-trained and experienced instructor, it is a powerful tool of exceptional breadth, depth, and flexibility. And it is a direct, explicit, multisensory, structured, sequential, diagnostic, and prescriptive way to teach literacy when reading, spelling, and writing don't easily come to individuals with dyslexia. So there are 12 principles in the Orton-Gillingham Academy, in the approach, and multisensory is just one of them. And so as you can see the definition here, this is how the Academy defines multisensory. So it uses all different learning pathways. So the seeing, hearing, feeling, and awareness of motion brought together by the thinking brain. And the instructor engages in multisensory teaching to convey the curricular content in the most understandable way to meet the needs of that specific learner. So the teacher also models how the student, by using a multiple facets to connect to the child, can engage in that multisensory learning that eventually results in greater ease and success in learning. So this leads me to my next slide. So why is this important? Again, and I know Blessing touched on this, but I really want to delve into it a little bit too from my perspective. Building and combining those neural connections equals pathways to make those connections. So I'm going to direct you to the picture in the middle of the screen. So on the left, you have the typical brain, and on the right, you have the dyslexic brain comparison. So because the dyslexic brain is receiving language only in a concentrated area, so as you see, it's the red area, it is imperative to make sure that various areas of the brain are getting those neurons to fire and make those connections. So what that means is we want the dyslexic brain to go from country road, so that's the picture on the left, just one direction, to go to the picture on the right, which is highways and making all of those connections. And the best way to do that is the multisensory approach, as you saw and heard in Blessing's presentation with her 3 wonderful students that she used as great examples. Repetition is huge, and it really helps with muscle memory and working memory to commit those sounds, rules, and patterns to the long-term memory to understand how to decode and essentially comprehend. Okay, so VAK, which was discussed in the last training, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So I have a video, a quick, I think 10-second video that I have modeled for you. But basically, when I worked with my primary age students, I would pull out drill cards and sound cards. And so I would say the letter, keyword, and the sound, and they would repeat back in a kinesthetic movement while saying it. So this can be skywriting, this can be writing on a whiteboard, this could be tracing in sand, or any sort of multisensory tool that really works best for the needs of that child. And the repetition, as I said in the previous slide, helps make those connections in the brain to know that this is the keyword, this is the picture, and this is the sound. So let's take a look at this example here, because I think watching this video will be more impactful. I hope you can hear the sound here. Okay, so here is my student actually doing it in the rice. So he's going to trace A, apple, while saying it as well in the rice. Okay, ready?
A, apple, A, apple, A, apple,
Excellent job. So this is a really, really good example for students that need this type of multisensory approach when you're teaching them how to read. And I've encountered a lot of students who have never had a multisensory approach. And at first they might just look at you and just say, or they may just trace in the sand and not say anything. So it really goes to show those 3 areas in the brain that are non-dyslexic. You want to make sure that dyslexic brain gets all those. So that multisensory approach is huge. Okay, so today I want to discuss some tools that you could use in the classroom. I will provide some tools for math, read, and also some things at the secondary level as well. And hopefully you can walk away with some good stuff to implement either with your students or your actual children. So let's delve in. Okay, so the first one we're going to discuss is math. Why is this approach important? So a woman named Ronit Bird is a teacher who specializes in students with dyscalculia and other specific learning difficulties, and she's a secondary teacher based out of London. So she's worked with students with dyscalculia in the mainstream, and she realized that these students really struggled. And so she wanted to develop some strategies and teaching activities to really support the needs of these learners. And she is an author, and she has a website called ronitbird.com. I highly recommend if you have a child or a student who struggles in math or has dyscalculia. She has really excellent tools. She is the author of the Dyscalculia Toolkit, which has been published 3 times. The most recent is in 2017, Overcoming Difficulties with Numbers, and this Dyscalculia Resource Book, which was last published in 2017. So Ronit Bird's philosophy is really to provide the necessary concrete and practical experiences, essentially in the most enjoyable way, to reach the needs of the students. So this is through games and activities, not worksheets. Typically, your traditional math teacher will say more worksheets, more of the same problems, rote. That is not how a child who has math anxiety or dyscalculia is going to learn. It's actually just going to cause more frustration. And I think Blessing even touched on this in her presentation. If you're having a child do the same thing over and over again wrong, first of all, that's going to kill their self-esteem and they're never going to get it. So you want to find different approaches and ways that work for them. Okay, so here are 10 multisensory tools that you can use in math. So because students struggle in math for a variety of reasons, it's always best to incorporate many tools and facets as much as possible. And a lot of these tools are simple, and maybe you have them around your house or in your school, or maybe you can obtain access to them without even knowing that you could use this as an option. So the top 10 on here are visualize with manipulatives, build with color cubes and tiles, draw math problems, tapping out numbers, musical connections, movement to math, bundling sticks, base 10 blocks, which is the picture to your right, hundreds chart, and pizza slices. So in the interest of time, I'm only going to touch on 3. So I'm going to talk about visualizing with manipulatives, drawing, and music. Okay, so any sorts of hands-on manipulatives such as beads, cereals, buttons, whatever it is, whatever, cater to the need of your student or child. It's a great way for students to engage in that hands-on learning to represent math operations and demonstrate the problem. So for example, you can practice division. You can break up the manipulatives in several different groups to show how many beads are in each group evenly. When items or manipulatives are used or are physically being moved, it gives students a more concrete concept to understand how math operations truly work. So using these manipulatives actually helps students to develop number sense. And this is crucial in math development because, as we know, math always gets more challenging. So if your student or child is struggling with basic addition or subtraction or their multiplication facts, if they aren't taught the way they learn, it's never going to improve, and the gap is going to continually become greater. I actually have a good friend who I did an Instagram live with, who is from Norway, and he has dyslexia and dyscalculia. And one interesting thing that he shared with me was the fact that he said, have you ever seen 5 represented, or have you ever seen 5? And the way he asked me, I was very confused, but it was a good point. It was basically the number 5. What does that mean for someone who thinks differently, for who's processing information? You tell a kid 5 + 2 who doesn't have a math disability, they'll tell you the correct answer. But if that child doesn't have a hands-on manipulative to say, let me move 5 pieces of cereal, and then have a symbol for addition, and then move 2 pieces of cereal, they won't know how to quantify that 5 is, 5 fingers on your hand or 5 pennies on the floor. So this is another way to really incorporate that physical movement of those manipulatives. Okay, so drawing is always a great next step after doing hands-on manipulatives. And this is always a fun, creative way for students to truly show their thinking in a different way. So this is basically a hop, skip, jump, and away from putting words into numbers and symbols to then go to that advanced approach in math, which is putting them in equations. So, excuse me, so you can ask a child to illustrate 5 × 2 and say, I have 5 groups of 2 apples. Can you draw this? And see what they come up with. Or you can do, I have 2 groups of 5 apples, and have the student then look at those problems side by side and compare the 2. That's where you can see if the child is truly making those connections and understanding what they did. Then what I think is really powerful is some teachers believe in the elementary level that kids shouldn't have big vocabulary to define math words. I completely disagree. I think if you can demonstrate by drawing pictures and showing 5 × 2 and 2 × 5, then you can introduce and say, this is the commutative property. Can you tell me why both of these drawings connect to this vocabulary word? So if students have that concrete and abstract connection to say, oh, this is the same thing. 5 × 2 is exactly the same as 2 × 5. When they advance to pre-algebra, algebra, all of the more challenging math classes, they'll be able to have that foundation. And the last one I want to touch on, and I have a video to show you, and I think this is really powerful, making musical connections. So think about those silly jingles or songs that get stuck in your head because you either enjoy them, or let's just say it's catchy and it's totally ingrained in your thoughts. Creating songs and rhythms from math facts and equations or formulas can be done in the same exact way. Some children are more easily inclined and they will remember information if it's in a sing-along. Or if you have students that are very musically, highly motivated with music, maybe you could equate it and say, a musical note and put it in a math equation. So this is a whole note. How many quarter notes make a whole note? And so there's an actual website, and I have a quick video. It's about 3 minutes, but I think it's worth it, called Musology. And this supports teachers with complicated math concepts, especially music of different genres. So it has, I think, rap and pop and country and a whole bunch of different types of music, but it's all educational, geared towards math. And so their mission is to harness the power of music to make learning math engaging and exciting for all students of all backgrounds and abilities. So with Musology, videos, students sing, hear, see, and dance their way to mathematical success. So let's take a look at this.
While many students today struggle with learning and find schoolwork boring, these same students know the words to countless pop songs. So we created Musology. Musology is a digital learning platform that uses music videos to teach curriculum and make learning fun. Musology is a gamified experience that works using 3 simple steps. First, answer the math trivia to unlock a music video. Next, watch the music video as many times as you need. Finally, take the math challenges to earn achievements and awards.
Musology is like in the song and it's movie and it sticks to your head. I think the music in the videos helps the kids relate to it.
X up and down, Y, left and right. X up and down, Y, reference lines on which you rely. The space where you grew. Now use these digits together, the ones below the subtraction line. In place.
And if the original integers both have the same sign, your product of quotient.
Developed by a team of hit songwriters, PhDs, and learning experts, Musology is a comprehensive learning system with proven results.
Music activates every neural system and subsystem identified by neuroscientists. Music lights up the brain.
Compared to other teaching methods, I've seen a higher level of engagement from more kids than with anything else I've used.
There's a catchy beat, a rhythm to it. They love that. It's academically sound. A hand motion may be enough to help them remember what they're supposed to do.
I'll just be in the middle of class and I'll be doing a test of it. I can't remember. But then
Wait, you guys can't see the video? Oh, no, okay. I didn't realize you guys could not see the video. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do, because that was like a minute and a half. I am going to, is there a way that I could share the video with people? I can share it with you in the chat and maybe you can watch it later. I am so sorry.
So it would be perhaps be good to if we had a link, that would be possible, because I thought it was just an audio.
Oh, could you guys hear it?
Well, I could hear it, and a couple persons in the chat says that they could hear it as well, but not the actual, we couldn't see any video.
Okay, so I'm so sorry. That's, technology these days. I'm going to pop it in the chat and then you guys can watch at your leisure, and I am going to just hop back into my presentation. So I apologize for that. So here's the video. Watch at your leisure. I think it's great, a great tool. And let me get back to my presentation. Oops, okay. Okay, can everyone see my slides now?
Yes, all good.
Okay, great. Okay, so sorry about that. So basically what I was gonna say was this program, the prices range depending on how many students and how large the school is or how large the district is. I think there's a place on the website where you can email someone to tell them what you're looking for, and I assume they'd send a package. But I thought this was an amazing resource that I know when I co-taught math for 8th grade math for 3 years, there were some concepts that kids just really didn't understand. And so I was always trying to think outside of the box and find a multisensory approach, and music is always a great tool. So with that being said, let's transfer over to reading. So as we all know, reading is not innate. Children don't just learn to read because someone's reading to them, especially students with dyslexia. They need that direct, explicit, and multisensory approach to learn how to read. So here are 8 tools in reading that I think Blessing touched on a few of these. So you can do sand and shaving cream, air writing, sand letters, word building, read it, build it, write it, tapping out sounds, story sticks, and shared reading. So similar to math, I'm only going to demonstrate or talk about 3 tools. So here are the 3 tools that we will delve into. Sandpaper is a great one. So you can actually, depending on the need of the student, you can use what's in this picture here to help the students trace letters. I know with some students who struggle with reversals, it's really good if you use a cutout so they know exactly what that letter is. So you can have the student trace the sandpaper and say B, 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 or you can have a keyword with it. I also know that you want to find something that's comfortable for the student in terms of how it feels, tactile. And some students like the really, really rough sandpaper and some like the more fine sandpaper. So obviously cater this to meet the needs of your child. But this is a fantastic way to kind of get those neurons firing and the muscle memory going. Tapping out sounds. So this is a big one. Tapping out sounds allows students to feel and hear the sounds are segmented and blended together to make a word. So it's really important that students hear those individual sounds. So in this case, you see the green, yellow, and red. So it would be t. And since you guys can see me, but this is a mirror image, I'm going to do it your way. So t. And then to blend the letters together, you can say mat. And that's always a great way for students I've seen who are actually practicing rules that I've taught them. And when I would do spelling tests that were just specific to the rule I taught them that week, sometimes I would see students tapping out the sounds to figure out what patterns and what letters matched the word that they were attempting to spell. Shared reading. So this one can be done in many different ways. And I actually enjoy this activity. So this is an activity that can be done with a teacher and a student, a support teacher and a student. If it's one teacher in the room and they have 30 kids and they're doing breakout, like comprehension groups or small group sessions, this can be done with a peer who is maybe a higher level reader and paired up maybe with a mid to lower level reader. And it can be almost like a mentorship activity. So there are many ways you can do this. You can have an audiobook reading to the whole class or the partners or the pairs. And maybe you say, okay, class, we're going to find the sight words or the high frequency words that we've been working on this week. So they're reading along, but then looking for a specific thing within that text. And maybe depending on if they're first graders versus fifth graders, you might say, we'll read one sentence. Can you find the high frequency word we worked on this week? Or what I usually do with my students when I'm tutoring them, I say, let's play OG detective, which is Orton Gillingham detective. Let's find all the digraphs in this sentence. Let's find all the vowel teams that we've learned this past month. Anything to engage them and also to bring it back for them to remember and still have that working memory going. So this could be used as a fluency activity. This could be used as a listening activity. This could be used as a listening and finding activity, a comprehension activity. Really be creative with this. I mean, it doesn't have to be extravagant. So I just reviewed some multisensory math tools you can use in the classroom, multisensory reading tools to use in the classroom. So now let's touch on the secondary tools. So I will say that I want to explain before I go to the next slide. So my dissertation topic was teaching students with autism at the secondary level with multisensory tools. So I did all of my work at a high school. And what I was looking for was I wanted the inclusion or general education setting to be geared towards students with, more specifically autism, but students with learning disabilities. How are these students being catered to? How are they being included? I don't want to observe kids that were pulled out in resource room. I want to know, how are these teachers able to basically teach to the needs of these students? So this was the purpose of my study. And so what I did was I actually, there were 4 teachers in my study. There was a 9th grade earth space science teacher. So she had a general education class and about 7 or 8 students in that class with individual education plans. There was a 10th grade biology teacher who taught general education. There was an algebra 2 teacher, and he taught a range of students. So you had your 9th graders who were very high achieving in math, and then you had your 12th graders who were repeating this class. And then I also did a gifted and talented English class, a 11th grade English class. So I had a wide range of teachers and students to observe. So I interviewed them at first, asked them what they knew about multisensory tools and what they were using currently in their class to meet the needs of the students. Then I developed a toolkit for me to observe. So I observed the class and, took note of inventory of the students, what was in the room, the environment, so on and so forth. And then I did a follow-up interview with each teacher to kind of just discuss what they thought they did, what was helpful, what they need, supports, so on and so forth. So here are my findings. So I came up with 3 major categories, and then within those categories, strategies that I either observed or put together from all of my observations to basically support these teachers who needed that extra support to know how to incorporate multisensory tools. So when you think about the primary level of teaching, so in my earlier presentation and then seeing Blessing's presentation, you think about the little kids, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. But what happens when those dyslexic students or students with autism or learning disabilities become 18-year-olds? Their disabilities don't go away. And it's really all about catering to who they are as individuals and how they best learn. So physical comfort and focus was one category. So within that category, these are the top things that I found were helpful. Alternative seating. So I know someone asked in the chat during Blessing's conversation about if a child can't sit for 30 minutes. I don't really think most people can sit for 30 minutes. We kind of force ourselves to. I know for me personally, I struggle with that. I have to get up, I have to move. I think oftentimes teachers need to tweak their philosophy of thinking that kids are just supposed to sit there and just listen. That's not a multisensory approach. So you could have a standing desk. You could have yoga balls for kids to sit on and bounce around while they're engaging with their peers. Kids can sit at the desks, but maybe they are stretching out their legs a little bit. Different ways and to think about how this can be a multisensory approach within the classroom. Stretch bands on chairs, I have all of those in my current classroom. So this is really good for those fidgety kids that really need something to kick and move around. Weighted vests. So I'm not sure if some of you are familiar with this, but this is more that compression. Some students with autism really like that heavy feel or that like tight feel. I don't see this as often at the secondary level because, as we know, teenagers are pretty self-conscious and they want to look like their peers. So that kind of have them stand out a bit, especially if they're in inclusive settings. Handheld fidgets are things that we probably all use and create in our own work environment. So maybe you have a pen that you're tapping on the table or a stress ball. Comfortable positions. So I saw this a lot in the high school level. Kids were able to go out in the hall and sit on the floor and do their labs or do work on the computer. Kids were laying on their stomachs on the floor in the classroom on the carpet. Anything that makes the environment open and comfortable for them to feel like they can be who they are. Earplugs was a big one too. So that's, basically quieting out any sound around you. So that's physical comfort and focus. So the second one is self-regulation and organization. And so what this looks like really is just daily routines and communication. So when the kids come in the classroom, do they see a schedule on the board? Do they know that they have a drill that they're supposed to do? Are there different ways that they know that they can get to their answer? Maybe they have an auditory way of going to, and I'm thinking of the science classes, they went to a lab and listened into something, or they went over and felt something if it pertained to that assignment. What are the class routines and expectations? Signals for students are really important too. So this could be maybe, let's say if a student has dyslexia and the teacher's aware of this, maybe they signal the student ahead of time to say, I want you to read this in 5 minutes. And of course, this is something the student and the teacher have talked about prior to being called on. Then that can be a way for the student to kind of quiet their anxiety and say, I had about 5 minutes to practice this question or read out loud to my peers. Then they're comfortable to say, okay, I can do this in my environment. Chewing gum was a huge one. And I know some teachers are very traditional and think that chewing gum is an absolute no. And I personally feel chewing gum is fine as long as kids are not putting it under the seat or putting it on someone's, paper or whatever. Chewing gum is actually a good way for some people really need that physical movement in their jaw. Sometimes it helps them focus on what they're doing. It can calm them. So I think before saying no to chewing gum, kind of ask why that student might need it. And maybe they're able to articulate that and tell you. The last category I explored was classwork and testing. So I have teacher can, and there was also a student can, but I wanted to focus on the teacher part. So reducing handwriting. So this is a big one, especially with students with dyslexia. Writing things out and typing things out may not be their favorite thing to do because maybe they're too bogged down on misspelling words and not able to contain all the information to get the notes down. So an easy, quick fix, just provide notes. Obviously in today's age with COVID and schools are virtual, provide slides and notes online. Also provide fewer distractions. So this is more of the environmental lay. So as much as we want multisensory approach to be that, to have the neurons connect in the brain, some students need things to not be so in your face with loud things and lights and things of that nature. So fewer distractions can benefit a lot of students. Minimizing visual input is a huge one. So I'm thinking, like, for example, this slide might be too visually, it might be too much for some people because there are a lot of words on it. So minimizing slides with words can be helpful and to not intimidate students to feel like they have to read every single thing on there. I think also providing some visual input is really good with pictures. So maybe have pictures and tell stories, have minimal words, and maybe get the students to engage in what their sense and feel is for presentations like that or lectures. And lastly, providing color overlays. So color overlays I thought are huge in math. So as I talked about before, math progresses and gets more challenging. Well, for example, when students were doing Pythagorean theorem, I would have them draw out, if it was a ladder that was on the side of a house and they had to figure out the triangle and label the two legs and the hypotenuse and figure out what they're solving, they would have to draw, but then maybe highlight and have color overlays to know, like, okay, this means I'm finding this. This means I'm looking for that. Those are really helpful, especially in word problems. So students know how to extract parts of the language to know what they're looking for. So in general, I think multisensory tools look a little bit different at the secondary level, especially in high school. And I think the biggest thing that I found, the overall theme, was you want to make things age appropriate. You don't want, even if a child is working at a 6th grade level and they're in 12th grade, it's your job, I feel, as an educator to find that high interest and close that gap so they feel like they're still in control of their learning and essentially not insulted. You don't want to do be, bat, buh, and then they're still, they're 18 years old, even if they don't understand what that looks like. So that is a different approach with the secondary level for multisensory tools. And I believe that is it. So I want to say thank you this concludes my presentation on multisensory tools for math, reading, and at the secondary level. And I hope you gain some knowledge. And I can be contacted at my emails on this slide, and my Instagram and Twitter page are the same. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lauren. I really appreciate and really enjoyed your presentation, and it really complemented the previous presentation in terms of really providing a little bit more depth and a little bit more going more comprehensive in terms of giving us what we should do in the actual classroom. So equipping teachers with the necessary toolkit, instructional tools to ensure that we're advancing not only reading outcomes, but also math outcomes. And one of the questions that I had, and I'm just looking in the chat, and I think Donald referred to this question, was really about and it really speaks to what you just said in terms of making sure that whatever we use is age appropriate. So Donald was asking in terms of these multisensory techniques, tools, or approaches, to what extent can this be translated or used with adults?
You know, I think honestly, it depends on what the circumstances are. I think sometimes there's a stigma where if you are a certain age, you know, it's childish to use sand, or it's childish to use sandpaper or whatever. But I truly believe that whatever it is you're trying to achieve, like totally have the confidence that if this is the best way that you learn, then own it. You know, I've told my students in my career, I was awful at math. I mean, absolutely awful. And I actually repeated algebra, and it was embarrassing at the time, but I actually used that to capitalize on my mistakes. And the students actually really appreciated, you know, me saying like, I wasn't good at this, but you know what, I'm going to work hard at it. And sometimes I still use my fingers, you know, things like that. So I think like, you know, owning that. I know for me, I've shared in some of my Instagram lives, like I actually I am an adult with ADHD and anxiety. So I forget things a lot. I have to put everything in my phone, everything down to reminding myself to take out the trash. So, I mean, you know, I think whatever works, whatever approach works for you as an adult, own it and kind of wear it with a badge, and let, you know, younger generations know like, hey, here's what's going on and here's how we can make this work.
Perfect. And one of the other interesting points made by Jemima was this idea of her son can read and write, but one of the issues is that he's not really interested in learning at all. And I think this multisensory approach that you have presented here, it really helps to engage the learners, especially I quite like, my favorite part was the music, using the music as well, because then you're using the gamified approach to ensure that students are sufficiently engaged, because if they're not engaged, then there's no way that you can present the material to them for them to even learn.
Sure. And I am actually going to say, I don't believe any child doesn't want to learn. I don't. I think kids are very resilient, but they're also fragile and they don't forget. And so if there was maybe one experience that they had that totally turned them off, that could be the turning point for them to say, I don't like going to school, or I have anxiety. I know when I started working at my private dyslexic school in the suburbs of Atlanta, parents were actually saying, my child is happy again. My child wants to go to school. And this was like my first year teaching, and I didn't understand. And they told me, they said, prior to being here, they would always have excuses of my stomach hurts, I don't feel well, you know, my teachers hate me. So there were all these things that showed the parents like, well, they don't want to learn, they don't like school. But really it was probably the way that they were being taught. And it was probably the teachers just didn't understand how to connect to them or connect with them. So, you know, I feel for the person who asked the question about their child not liking school. I think he does like school. He just needs to find that thing to unlock and make him feel empowered to know, like, I can do this and my teachers understand me now.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because it's always that issue where you look at the students and they're very early on in kindergarten. I remember I was watching this video of a student, and I think her father videoed her every year until she was in high school, and you could see the progression change from kindergarten. She was excited to go. High school, she was just happy. Her favorite time of the day was break, when she didn't have to be in the classroom setting. So it's just finding that way of finding out, making the learning individualized, but also, and in that way, it will be fun for the student. So I just want to thank you for that. Really appreciate the beautiful presentation, and I'm sure that our participants have taken away a lot. And I've seen in the chat that many persons also want to contact you. So
sure, absolutely. Here, I'll drop my email address in the chat, and I would be more than happy to speak to people.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Lauren.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What I will do now, I'll hand it over back to Beatrice, who will take us through a little bit of overview of how we're going to use the breakout room. As we come to the end of our session, we want to make sure that you're sufficiently engaged as participants. So I'm going to ask Beatrice just to give you a little bit of overview about how our breakout session will work.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Samantha. So for this next session, we will, sorry, just to draw participants' attention to the fact that today being the last day, we sort of took the liberty to extend it for an additional 30 minutes based on the feedback from yesterday's session. Yesterday's session about the fact that people didn't have adequate time to ask questions and interact more with the facilitators. So with the breakout rooms, since we're estimating we're about 200 people presently, so there's going to be about 10 breakout rooms. For each of the breakout rooms, what I'd urge all participants to do is to just together look at what the takes on the both presentations are, what are the major takeaways from today's sessions, and have one person who's the rapporteur who would be reporting back to plenary. In terms of the timings for the breakout sessions, it should be 10 minutes for the breakout sessions. And when we return to plenary, each note taker, each speaker from the breakout rooms would have 1 minute to 2 minutes to report back to plenary in terms of what the main takeaways from their breakout groups are. So for those of you that haven't had the opportunity to ask your questions, seek clarification, the breakout rooms would be a great opportunity to get your comments and questions across as well. The facilitators and the moderators would be popping into the various breakout rooms periodically, just to get a hang of the discussions. And when we do come in, yes, kindly ignore us and just go right ahead with your discussions. We're just in to listen in. So without much ado, I will throw it back to Rosalind, who's going to do the splitting of the breakout rooms in a few minutes. Thank you
so much
for your attention.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's advisable during the breakout room to put on your camera as much as possible, because this is where you get to meet somebody and really have an intimate conversation. So we're opening the room now, and it is for 10 minutes. Thank you. Just click the button join when you see it pop up on your screen. Just click on joining the room, and then you can go to the room. Please click the button if you are not in a breakout room. Please click a button and join a room. I still see some people in the main room here. Please click a button and join a room. Please click the button and join the room. We will not be discussing anything here in the main room. So please click a button and join the room. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. You can unmute yourself whilst in this room. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Please unmute yourself and just introduce yourself to each other. Introduce yourself to each other and take away for okay. You can unmute yourself now. Okay. If not, nobody is talking. You just be and you won't just anything. So maybe I'll start the conversation for you. What have you taken up from the 2 days experience of dyslexia? Have you learned anything? What are some of those things among yourself? But you can start by
okay. Maybe I think I can start speaking first.
Right.
Okay, so my name is Hudea Turau. Yes, and I joined in from Ghana. Yes.
Sorry, this is Donald. I'm in here in England.
Hi.
Today's session.
Hi, Donald.
Hi, all. But looking at the program, it's not as much of what I got away from it because this is what I do 26 years, so there's not a lot I'm learning here. But my question is what I'm not seeing, because it's the reason why I started an organization in England to do with adults, because the majority of groups focus on children.
Like Lauren shared, there were things that everyone could relate to, in this. Everyone could relate to, and then make it happen in the classroom setting, or even in the home setting. So yes, they've given us that doesn't really look, because looking at whatever they use, the resources, the tools, I think they sort of fit into our Ghanaian context, and so I think it is time for us to want to replicate them in our schools and in our homes and everywhere. So yes, this has been very insightful for 2 days, and then I would like to see more of these, everyone to appreciate that something like this actually exists. So thank you very much.
I'll say my take on it was about 7 would be the most appropriate one, or what I've learned is 7, because before, definitely screening must be going on, all the support that needs to be going on must be going on, but to be actually properly assessed, I would say age 7, and that's what we're discussing. But obviously, yes, you do sort of, because some children are slow learners, so not because they are not picking up so fast means they are dyslexic. So just giving them a chance to, because in Ghana, I think we start class 1 or year 1, year 6, 6 years of age. So the first year, once they're getting used to coming back from enjoying the rhymes and the singing and our preschool, and then coming into year 1, they're now going to adjust their way of learning. And so by the time they finish, if they're not really reading seriously, then serious intervention must be introduced. That's what I'll say.
Okay, great. Beatrice, are you there?
Have we lost it?
I think we lost Beatrice.
From room 12?
I think Mavis also had a question from the chat. She said in her breakout session, a point came up that she wanted to follow up with, I think it's Dr. Lauren. So Mavis, you can go ahead and ask your question.
I'm going to try to unmute everyone, but please, if you're not talking, don't make any interruptions so that we can have a smooth conversation. Thank you.
So what was the question?
Oh, so the question hasn't been placed as yet.
Oh,
she just said that she wants to follow up. So I'm inviting her now to turn. Mavis, can you turn your microphone on and ask your question, please? All right, so while we wait on Mavis, I think Carl has another question in terms of, sorry, Mavis is unable to mute. So while we work on that, if we could ask Dr. Lauren from Carl, he teaches math in high school and is currently finding it challenging to teach theorems. So any resources that you could suggest would be lovely.
Sure. So I am not as familiar with circle theorem. So is that like pre-calculus or calculus? What I can do is I can actually ask some friends in the math world who are more familiar with high school math. But I think depending on whatever your approach is, some of the things that I spoke in generality, like use music, if you can find some jingles or ways to kind of help kids really commit I know as you get further along in math, there are many equations kids just need to know. I don't know if you use like a formula book, as a quick reference tool for students to kind of, if you're starting a new unit or starting a new concept, to say, okay, guys, let's jot this down. And this is our formula book and you can reference it. I also know some math teachers are really hesitant to letting students use resources during quizzes and tests. And I always think, well, this could be a really great way for those kids who have poor working memory to know that they can use that. Because really, I always say, what are we assessing? So if you're giving students an assessment on circle theorems, I'm sure you're more interested in knowing how they got their answer rather than penalizing them for using a formula book. So if those students really have poor working memory, or really are struggling with understanding, well, I don't know what formula to use, but if they do know the formula and they know how to get it, then that's what you should focus on. So I think I would probably have to know more specifically what it is you would need support with, but those are my suggestions off the top of my head.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Lauren. Okay, so Carl, I suggest if you require any follow-up from Dr. Lauren, feel free to reach out to her at the contact information that she provided. So we're going to go with David from room 11. I'm very interested in terms of government.
Yes, thank you so much, Samantha. Unfortunately, I've quoted room 11, and the person with whom we are in the room is reminding me that I was in room 10. She was in room 11. Both of us are attending. Now, we were discussing government policy, and I was talking about a situation whereby getting information about dyslexia, even in African countries, is an uphill task. I have a colleague who was working on a research on dyslexia and how it affects the public primary schools. And when covering all the other regions, the literature was there. So she had enough literature review. In Africa, it was quite scarce to an extent that she was wondering whether hers was going to be the first in Africa. But then what has come out is from yesterday's meeting, we talked about strength-based approach. And today we're talking about multisensory approach to teaching and learning. Very good stuff for now. But then we're looking back at the countries from where we come. I'm currently in Ghana, heading the middle year school, the IB middle year school in Al Rayyan, but I'm Kenyan. And I'm trying to look back at, even back at home, how policy is structured in a way that it could be geared towards learning needs of students like these. It looks like what is looked at is those with physical disabilities, for instance, those perhaps that people can physically see. But for those, what I could put in quotes, soft needs like ADHD, those like dyslexia, they're nowhere in the radar. So, and if you look at the way the curriculum is packaged, when you have the IB, kind of, you've got a student you can stimulate in the arts, you can help the student to get to learn the music, to do the drama, to do the film art, to do the visual art. You could turn the child around, do the sciences, you bring the child around to the humanities, bring the child around and do the physical health education where it's not just jumping in the field. But then when you look at the policy as it is and the way our curricula are arranged, perhaps largely in our region, it's so cognitive to an extent that it makes it really a tough call. And so we were discussing this in our meeting and we were saying, Perhaps as educators, time has come when perhaps advocacy needs to go to another level. We need to reach a point where we are like ambassadors, getting out to let that parent who thinks his or her child is bewitched to get to know that, hey, come on, there's a solution to this, because some have actually associated it, even perhaps with certain rights. Of course, that did not come out in room 10. That's now mine from the experience I've had. You find that parents, first of all, are so stigmatized that they don't want to accept the condition of their child or to be associated with the kind of condition the child has. So what we came up with in the summary is we need to go out from this session as ambassadors. Do whatever little you can to make this happen. And like Theodore Roosevelt said one time, do what you can with what you have where you are. And I think that could be the message I could send to my people coming from African diaspora, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, David. Wonderful and wonderful. What a wonderful way I love quotes, and who knows, that can be the mantra for the mission that you're about to embark upon. And it's true, you're right in saying that a lot of times, ever so often, these cognitive difficulties, because they're not, you can't physically see them. Yes, you can see them in a way where the student is not able to read, but it's not as prominent as somebody who has a physical disability. And unfortunately, these reading problems don't present them, the difficulties don't really present themselves until years later. Unfortunately, sometimes when it's a little bit too late or it's more difficult to remediate. And so one of the things that I've always thought about this topic in terms of how is it that we're going to actually get the research into policy and policy into practice. And one of the other things that I think that teachers or, we need to be doing is the persons in the university or in the big think tanks where they're doing these research, they actually need to be making themselves a little bit more available, because there's a breakdown, especially in the university setting where you find the science of reading. The psychology department doesn't really communicate that much with the education department, and therein lies the breakdown. And so unfortunately, sometimes as academics, we aren't trained in how to communicate the science in an accessible way or in a way that makes sense to policymakers for them to translate that into policy and then practice. So as part of your mission, David, I would suggest that you also engage with the university researchers to let them know what are the practical issues that you're having on the ground. And in that way, you can start to co-collaborate with them to make that particular change.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Samantha.
You're welcome.
I see Beatrice is ready to speak briefly.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Beatrice, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Please, I want to know, how long does it take to assess a child, to be able to diagnose the child? Hello?
Well, it depends. It depends on what you're assessing, because testing of a child is very comprehensive. It can happen in a couple of hours, but more often than not, it's within a couple of days, and then you have to take a time to analyze the information. So it depends on what the child is, what sort of difficulties the child is presenting with, and then you map the appropriate assessment to that particular testing session. But I'm just gonna ask for Dr. Lauren's insight here as well, if you have anything to add on that.
Can you repeat?
So in terms of how long does it take to assess for reading difficulties?
Oh, okay. I think it really depends on how young the child is. I think the earlier the better. So if you are seeing signs when your child is maybe 4 or 5 and really starting to understand, putting words together and sounds, actually probably before that. But really, like typically here in the United States, they say you can't assess until 3rd grade, and that's not true at all, because at that point, if a child is severely dyslexic, they've lost a lot in the first 7 years. So I think if you catch it at a young age, it won't take as long to assess versus if someone's 18 or 19, or in Rosalind's case, she was, I think, 30. So I think, you know, that's a different story. But I think it's more of, it's not just the actual assessment piece, it's more of what that comes with. So it's more of like, you know, what the social emotional aspect is kind of what I'm alluding to.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that for us. Nicholas from room, I think it's room 8.
Yes. Thank you. Finally, I got the opportunity to speak, and I'm very appreciative. I think that this work is going to have a lasting, effect on most people. Noting from the fact that there are quite a number of people who are educators, who are teachers, and picking from my room and what we were actually looking at, a number of people were appreciating, looking at the enormity of, the effect that this is going to have on educators. Some are actually looking ahead up for the materials, and that is going to really help them. So if the hosts would be able to, the organizers would be able to expedite action on that. And then you'd come across some people also who have such challenges, not only in schools, but around them, among their neighborhood, and they have so much desire to help them. So, someone talked about, the importance of, music, and he appreciates that so much, and he sees how important music is to children who are dyslexic, and not only that, not only children who are dyslexic, but children in general. In fact, I noted in the course of our discussion that the way to go is to be flexible, right? And the way to go is to adopt the multisensory approach. You understand? Fortunately, I was born and bred in Ghana, and I taught English language for 10 years in Ghana. And then fortunately, I became the special education coordinator for a number of years before coming up to where I am. I'm studying at Glasgow now. And I have noticed that one thing that we do not do is to sit back and plan our work before we get to our classrooms. That's all. Because I look through all the discussions that we have done, the approaches, and they are not new stuff. They are to remind us that before you get to the classroom, think about the children, expect challenges in the classroom, and then look at ways you would surmount those challenges. And I'm sure when we get there, I got to a point, I noticed that in JHS 1, my children will come in and most of them do not know how to read, so I started looking at phonics in JHS 1. I started looking at vowels and consonant sounds, because those are the combination of those sounds would help the child to do proper articulations and pronunciation of words. So and I was able to do that to get the next group of people, get to know how to put sounds together, and then get to do good work attacking and be able to, pronounce words properly. And they were eventually able to read. Guess what? Initially, they were so worried because from the previous class, they were doing what they call chorus reading. So everybody gets up early in the morning, and then the teacher comes, and then everybody picks a storybook, which everybody has, and then we all read together. That's what they call chorus reading. And so at a certain point, some of these children went to the headmaster and told the headmaster, "Sir, I think that this teacher is not really helping us because we are not doing a lot of reading, mass reading. And all we are doing is we have started looking at verbs and sounds and all these things." So the head called me. I went to him and I told him to relax. I have studied the results over a period, and he should just give me a short while. And guess what? Those who I met in Form 1 got the best results in the school, even up to now. That record has not been broken. So you see, I think that we need to be flexible in what we do. We need to expect challenges, And then let us note that one thing that we should note is that writing letters are all skills, right? So writing 2 is a skill. Writing C is a skill. So the fact that the child is not able to write 2 does not mean that the child has some form of disability, because my children have had problems with 2, but with proper remediation, they were able to surmount that. And the first one is reading very well in class 1, primary 1 now. So let us be careful. Assessment is in stages. In Ghana, you would have to do the basic screening from the school. And then you need to, if you have challenges, you need to take it ahead to the assessment center where the child is properly diagnosed. And many of us do not properly diagnose the children. And then we start labeling them. That alone is a big deal. Finally, let me say that, the policy, has come to stay. It has followed a certain, tangent, and things have happened over the period. And I see a number of research as I go through, as I study to, my PhD. I have read a number of, even this morning I was reading a number of researches, and I noticed that those researches have influenced the policy, and I see practice being influenced with the introduction of this new curriculum. So I believe that we have a way to go. We have to do a lot of advocacy and training. And once we do that for our teachers, I'm sure that the sky will be our limit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Beautiful insights and beautiful overview. And we just want to thank all our contributors today, from representative from the sessions. We are mindful of the time, so unfortunately we won't be able to take a representative from each session, but we've seen where you've posted their messages in the chat. We appreciate your level of engagement, and what we'll try to do is try to provide some sort of response outside of this forum, because we want to keep the conversation going. But we also want to take the opportunity to be able to get your feedback in terms of what you thought about the sessions. So I'm going to ask Rosalind to now place a poll on the screen for you to provide your feedback. So you should see it appear on the screen now.
Please click on the poll you see on your screen of the questions over there and select how you feel for question number 1, number 2, and number 3. Please do that. We have a lot of people here, but people are not reacting to the poll. Thank you.
Perfect. So we see the responses coming in. So it's a timed poll. So there's a limited time within which you are given to respond. So I think you have about, what's the time frame, Rosalind?
I will end it in the next minute.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I think we will end the poll here. We had just a little over 100 out of the many people that are here. We do appreciate those of you who took your time to react to the poll. We will send you an actual survey for you to kind of rate us to see how best we can enhance your experience for next of trainings that we will be having in the future. But we really do appreciate you for today. Samantha, you can take over.
Thank you so much, Rosalind. All right, so I just want to say thank you to everyone for, firstly, for providing your details so that we can properly contact you if it is that you wish to receive a certificate. So Rosalind was asking for that information in the chat. But what I want to do is to take this opportunity to say we made it. We made it to the end, and this is officially the end of Dyslexia Awareness Month. But what I want to do is just to say that I hope that these training sessions and also the sessions that you will see in the future, that they will really provide a platform for us to continue the advocacy that we're so passionate about, because persons with dyslexia, especially students, they need a voice, they need us to represent them, they need us to fight on behalf of them to ensure that they are equipped with this very essential life skill, which is the ability to be readers and readers in a skillful manner. So I just want to thank you for bearing with us and taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us over these 2 days. And we really hope that you've learned something new. I'm sure you've learned something new because we had dynamic speakers, and we want to hear how you're going. So feel free to reach out to the Africa Dyslexia Association organization, and we would like to keep the conversation going. So we want to say a big thank you, and we hope to see you again in our next training sessions. We will definitely be in touch. Hello.
Yeah, please, I want to find out how one can become a member of the association.
Okay, Douglas, you have our contacts. Please send me a message and we'll talk, because we have an opportunity where people can be part. So for instance, if you are an educator, a teacher, and you are really passionate about helping children with learning difficulties to succeed in life, we are looking for you. If you are an educational psychologist and you also want to be part, we are looking for whatever background that you have that you think it can contribute to the Africa Dyslexia Organization and Dyslexia Ghana. We are looking for you. And so please send us a message and we'll share a form with you where you can fill it, just a very simple form, just to know who you are and your background and what you can do to support the organization. For the teachers, what we do have in mind is really to give teachers with the right skills and resources and opportunities to enable them provide the right assistance we are looking for. Because if we are looking at the national scale, that is very big. We don't know when we will get there, but then in our own small way, we can assist teachers and parents even in a very small way to give support to students with learning needs. And so please get in touch with us. You have the WhatsApp number that's you have over there. You have the email address as well. And you can visit our website, africadyslexia.org and dyslexiaghana.com, and learn more about us as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Rosalind. And with that, we will say, have a lovely day. Have a lovely morning, day, afternoon, night, wherever you are in the world. We appreciate you, and we're excited to see what change will come from the collaboration and from the learning that we've gained from these 2 sessions. Thank you, everyone, and take care.
Take care, Samantha.
Thank you. Thank you so
much. Thank you, Samantha. Thank you, everyone.
God bless you so much. God bless you so much. We anticipate for another lesson like this, another program like this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a wonderful one.
Thank you, everyone. Follow on Facebook. They are on Facebook.
Oh, great.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
What about the emails you promised?
So basically, we're going to share all resources to you. We're going to share all resources